Welcome to another edition of the Litigation Psychology Podcast. Here we go again, Dr. Bill Kanasky. This is brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. I'm jumping right. I got a great guest today, but before that, I'm going to jump right into my rant, and then I'm going to drag her into the rant. So I was reading today, and there's always an article about this floating around, and it's just out of control. And I'm reading an article, somebody got on social media, either on Twitter or TikTok, and was complaining that they were on an airplane and somebody asked them to switch seats so they could sit with their family. And the girl refused. I said, no, I paid for this seat. I want this seat. And I'm not switching seats. And there's this big uproar. Okay. Now I travel most weeks of the year, and I can tell you this: if you ask me to change my seat, you're going to get a big tall glass of go blank yourself, because no. Listen, if you want to sit with your family or your friends, that's why you book your flight early. Okay. You see the seating chart, you can pick okay. You don't pick 3 seats, okay, a mile away from each other, and then have a plan. Think about this. You're going to have a plan. Yeah, once we get on, people will gladly get up and move. No. And why would you don't need to sit? I mean, now if you have small kids involved, if you have small kids involved, that's definitely your fault for screwing that up, right? How do you not book those seats together? But
yeah, I would disagree on that. Because the airline has messed up our seats before when we paid for 3 seats together and then they switched them on us. And
okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we have an out of control guest who has jumped into the rant. Before her introduction, let me introduce you, Holly Howanitz from Wicker Smith. Holly, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm outstanding. Well, I'm a little aggravated from this rant I got. Now, by the way, Holly was one of our first guests on the podcast several years ago, and now we've over 150 episodes, so we're happy to have her back. Holly, if you can't sit on a 2.5-hour flight and read a book or listen to this podcast and not be next to your family or your friends, something's wrong with you. Would you give up your seat? I'm not giving up my seat.
So I'm happy to sit alone. I just think it would be irresponsible parenting to not sit with my 10-year-old.
Okay, fine. But it'd be irresponsible parenting to not book the ticket appropriately to sit next to your 10-year-old. So this never happens.
No, right? I would agree. You should book the ticket appropriately. On the off case that you didn't, perhaps someone should move.
But if it's a couple, I have my husband sitting 5 rows back. Now, what I have done is they say, hey, my husband's sitting 5 rows back. He's in an aisle seat. You're in an aisle seat. Do you mind? I'm like, okay, because I'm 6 foot tall. I'm like, okay, I'll gladly switch. You guys, but I'm not switching from an exit row aisle to a middle seat in economy.
Right. I would agree 100% that it is unreasonable to ask someone to give up their aisle seat for your middle seat.
Thank you. And if you when you book flights now, you see the seating chart. All the boxes have prices on them, so you could be losing $200 by switching seats. It just gets annoying. It's just people that ask to do so. People do not do that. That's very, very bad. And that's my rant today. Holly, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Love repeat guests, and you and I have been talking back channel about one of your cases, but then you brought up something really important because trials, I'm getting calls on trials constantly now, and we're really in the full swing of it. A lot of attorneys going back to trial, and even everybody's admittedly said, hey, you don't use it, you'll lose it. You get rusty, right? And so, one of the most important parts about preparing for trial is opening statement construction. And jurors, as you know, their attention span is not bad, it's atrocious. And how you put together an opening statement and to keep their attention and to not lose them, make sure they're not falling asleep, is really important. And we have, we're in a society now that, these things right here, these cell phones, I mean, everybody's addicted to them. And then when you're on your app, whether it be, whatever, TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is, Facebook, I mean, you have this ability to sweep up or across to like, you don't like the stimulus you're looking at's too boring, and you boom, next thing, boom, next thing, boom, next thing. Well, in the courtroom, the jurors don't have the ability to just sweep to the next defense attorney, right? They're kind of stuck with you. So tell me about kind of your philosophy when preparing an opening statement, and what the things that you're trying to do and what's going through your head, because you want to maintain, you want to attract, you get their attention early, but then you want to keep it throughout your presentation.
So what I do is I kind of like to come out swinging, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
I see, even I had a trial a couple of weeks ago, and the plaintiff's attorney did the whole, thank you for your time. This is the civil justice system is great, and this is you doing your civic duty, blah, blah, blah.
Bad.
And so within that first, minute of introduction, I think he already lost their attention. Yeah. So, I obviously every trial has to have a theme, and that has to come out pretty quickly in your opening statement. So I think you need to do something to get their attention in like the first 15 to 30 seconds, which is about the length of the most successful, TikTok videos and Instagram reels are about 30 seconds long. So really you need to come out the gate and have your theme in mind. So you don't just say, my name is, this is my client. You say, this is a case about a minor accident that didn't cause any permanent damage. The evidence is going to show you that. I'm going to go through it with you now. So that way it's kind of like you've given them your roadmap, and they're like, oh, that's what I'm going to listen to.
Yeah, I think a lot of those, again, I published a paper on this a while ago. I think a lot of the small talk, the little things can be done in jury selection, as far as introducing yourself, thanking them, all of that. Now, I have a confession here. This is a huge confession. I am very anti-social media. I don't really consider LinkedIn social media. It's different. It's work, so it's kind of in a class of its own. But like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, I don't have any of that stuff, right? So my son, who's 14, he's very active in basketball, and he's big. He's kind of big into nutrition and fitness, which I think is fantastic. And so he starts sending me TikTok videos from like, fitness experts or nutrition experts. And I start, because he's like, hey, can you watch this and let me know if you agree with it? Because I have a pretty strong background in that. And I start watching these videos. Holly, I am 100% I am addicted to TikTok. I love it. Oh my God. I wake up in the morning, first thing I do, boom, TikTok. I love it. And I got all my fitness stuff. Then whatever the algorithm had, they got me figured out. I got my history stuff that comes in, then my nutrition stuff. And then I'm out of my mind with this stuff. I love it. But the key to those videos is grabbing their attention. You grab someone's attention early, because I will even admit, I get 3, 4, 5 seconds. I mean, you go to the next one. Talk to me a little bit about, and I know maybe every court's different, every judge is different. What's your philosophy? So back to opening statement, your ability to use a visual stimulus, or maybe even multiple, during your opening, and what you're trying to accomplish with that. I just posted on LinkedIn earlier this week. I said, because of things like TikTok, people see stories, they don't hear stories anymore. What is your philosophy on that, and the types of things that you're trying to do from a visual stimuli standpoint?
So with opening statement, I usually do kind of like a slide deck, and I will kind of go all the way up to the line of what would be considered argument with visuals. Some things Excellent. I strategically want to save for closing. Yeah. But as far as like, let's say it's a case with a bunch of medical records, then obviously I'm going to pick the key records that are going to be shown to them, multiple times during the case, and go through those in opening. I usually don't go through the records in chronological order, because then, I think you lose their attention. But if I kind of get the theme out there, then I'm like, okay, now I'm going to show you some records. If there's photographs, I put those up right away. So yeah, I think people remember very little of what they just hear. Yeah. Like the days of trying a case on a notepad are kind of gone. You don't just get your legal pad out there and get up there and do a monologue. But I want to go ahead and preview what I think is going to be the key evidence and show it to them, because they're taking notes too, like at least in Duval County and most of the the counties in Florida, they let them take notes. So that gives them something to kind of take down as well.
Yeah. Now, can I say is it Duval?
Yeah.
Yes, I was at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Crazy, crazy a football game. That was one of the most insane sporting events I have been to. We'll talk more about that later. Talk about there's an example of where an opening did not work out well.
Yeah, the first quarter is not the warm up. Somebody needs to tell them
Yeah.
that that's the
Yeah,
game.
four
Not the
interceptions in the first half is not. Yeah, so if you're giving your opening statement, you may not want to throw four interceptions or fumble four times in the first half of
right.
your opening, because in the courtroom, I can assure you, the second half comebacks are a rarity. Now, I'm sure you have associates that work with you, and I'm sure that part of your job is mentoring. And training, and you're talking to them, about, opening statements and things like that, what you're trying to accomplish. How does the length of your opening statement vary depending on the case you have? Because again, we're struggling with this. Okay, jurors have shitty attention spans, and some cases are very straightforward. Some cases are more complicated. Some cases you have a co-defendant maybe that you're going to have to talk about. How do you kind of adjust how long you're talking in your opening based on the case that you have?
Well, sometimes the judge does that for you. And
Yeah.
you get like an allotted amount of time. I try to make the last opening I did was like half an hour. And it was a case with some pretty big medical records. So if you don't need it, it doesn't need to be in there. You really just kind of need to be giving them the highlight reel and, piecing the story together where they're already, I guess, developing a bias in my favor by the end of opening, hopefully. But as far as the length, I had one guy once do a 2-hour opening statement, the plaintiff's attorney. It was awful. And it was hard for me to listen to it and pay attention. So I can't imagine what the jurors were doing. So I would say, 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the complexity of the case, is generally a good length. If it's a really easy case, or really cut and dry, maybe even like 20 minutes.
That I completely agree, because I think that is your window for most cases. It's really hard. I always tell them 25 to 30 minutes is your sweet spot. After that, it's really difficult for a jury to pay attention, particularly if they've just listened to plaintiff's opening, right?
Right.
There's some cognitive fatigue there. There could be some boredom there. Have you ever given an opening where, okay, back to our football, since I started talking about the Jaguars, where you've had to call an audible in your, so in other words, you've had to change the play at the line of scrimmage because of what the plaintiff did in their opening, and you said, holy shit, I didn't see that coming, and now you have to make a change like on the fly in your opening because of something you just saw that maybe they took a slant that you weren't ready for?
I haven't had it happen in a negative way, meaning, like, oh, I didn't have that planned for my case, which I guess is lucky, but I've had a couple of times when they've given me a gift and said something that, it was I already sort of had a theme worked out, but they just like fell right into the whole of my theme. So I might rearrange what the first thing I say is based on that, just to kind of like throw a large punch, I guess. So I do pay attention. The last trial I had, I sort of did that with my closing because they really gave me sort of a gift with the theme that they tried to work with in closing. So I worked theirs into it and then went right back into mine.
Okay, last thing on the opening, then we're going to transition. What do you tell? Because I think this is really important. Because I find that clients, whether it be a plaintiff or a defendant or a corporate rep or whatever, I find them to be very undisciplined at counsel's table. And then if you're up giving an opening, you can't be babysitting your client, right? One of your partners or colleagues is doing that. What do you tell because I'm always telling these witnesses, I'm like, listen, when the plaintiff's given the opening statement and they're calling you out and saying every bad thing about you, I go, you can't have smoke coming out of your ears. Your face can't turn red. You can't be grinding your teeth angry because the jury's going to be checking you out, how you're reacting, right? And then when your attorney's up there, You can't be like, headbutt, you can't be doing that. You can't be like, yeah, go get him, Holly. You've got to be the same person, be professional. What's the talk that you have with your client? Like, okay, when I'm up here saying all these great things about you and your company, you need to reel it in and pay attention and not be doing anything crazy, right?
I always tell them to pretend like they're in a fishbowl, that you're like the fish and the jury's looking at you. And, essentially anything you do, even though you're not, actively doing anything in the case, they're going to make observations. So, you don't want to look like you're not paying attention at all and, sitting there reading a book while the plaintiff's counsel is giving an opening. But you also don't want to look like you're emotionally reacting to either side of the case.
Nice, thank you. Sorry about my live on air sign is flopping back here. It's because my cat first. Okay, rant number two. So my cat, and she loves me, right? But now she's playing with my live on air sign. And if you're watching, you'll be able to see this. If you're listening, you won't be able to see it. She puked. So we changed cat food. She puked all over my podcast studio.
Oh, no.
There's just like paper towels everywhere. I haven't been able to clean it up because when I see puke, I start to puke. So this is a very bad. So I have to make somebody else clean this up, my wife or my kids. But yeah, so this is a very difficult work environment I have today. I apologize for that. Let's transition. I'm going to ask you a very difficult question. be careful with your answer. But it's okay. So it's the start of the year, and I made a joke at the end of the year and right at the beginning of the year because in college sports, this transfer, everybody knows the transfer portal is, right, and it's making everybody crazy, and then everybody's going nuts, and you see this player, leave, say, the Florida Gators, and now they're going to go play for somebody else, and you're like, oh no, I can't. And it's like that's the thing now, and so many players do it. And it aggravates a lot of the alumni that have been donating money and they love their teams, and people leave. And I made a joke on LinkedIn because I saw a lot of attorneys leaving at the end of the year, first of the year, right? And I said, wow, the transfer portal for law firms is actually red hot on fire now. And that continues into February here as I watch LinkedIn and people changing around. So a colleague leaves. Usually that is not taken very well internally in any job, usually, right? How do you personally deal with that when you have a colleague maybe you worked with for a while, someone that you and your firm has invested a lot of time in, maybe a lot of money in, a lot of trust, and they pick up and want to leave and go to a competing law firm or something like that? I know this happens all the time, but boy, I've talked to many attorneys off air, obviously, that have been very, very upset when their colleagues do this. How do you cope with that? How do you get through that as a firm internally? How do you not hold grudges? Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen, right? How do you deal with this?
Yeah, I have to say I've grown a lot in this area because I used to take it very personally, like if an associate left me.
Yeah.
But I've kind of gotten to the point where you can't react emotionally to what people have to do for themselves professionally, and especially if it's somebody that you've built a friendship with. You kind of want to keep the friendship even if they're not still working with you. So I guess it is kind of like the transfer portal. Everybody has to make the decision that's best for them at the time. Hopefully they won't regret it. I've had people leave and come back before. So
wow, that's interesting.
But I think that my advice would be just try to not react emotionally to professional decisions.
Yeah, it's not easy, and it happens. It's gonna happen. But I think the key is, it's gonna hurt for a while. But you gotta move on, and you gotta grow, and you gotta build the team that you have.
Yeah. And there's a limited amount of attorneys that can actually do trial work out there.
This is
So
true.
I've had them, take in-house jobs or take more like corporate type jobs.
Yep.
And a lot of times when I look at it, I think that was probably the right decision because every time I do a trial, I'm kind of like, now, why did I choose to do this? But
yeah, you just brought up something that's not on my outline. And this is one of the dirty little secrets. I bring this up during many of my speeches. I think that this is a fact that I'm about to bring up. No one's gonna like it, but hey, you brought it up, so it's your fault.
It's my fault.
Okay, well, I'm gonna say it right now. There are not a lot of defense attorneys that can try a case. They're not. There is a minority percentage of attorneys that can actually do this. And so the difference between a litigator and a trial attorney, there are only so many true trial attorneys out there. That's a fact. And again, no one's posting about this, but it's a fact. How does Wicker Smith like so what do you guys do internally? Like, hey, we have really good attorneys, right? You want the best attorneys, but trial attorneys are different, right? They're different than litigators. What types of things do you do as far as, again, mentoring, training, whatever it takes to get your younger people up to that next level? Because being able to try a case and doing that well is not easy. That's not something that just comes overnight. And how do you and your firm deal with that issue as far as the growth of your younger people and getting more trial attorneys to be talented?
Well, I'm going to say something controversial right off the bat. It
There we
has to
go.
be partnership with the clients.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times we'll have clients that are like, well, you're going to do that, right? You're going to do that deposition. You're going to go to that mediation.
Yep.
So part of it is like, negotiating with the clients to
Yeah.
let the younger attorneys actually get the experience.
Big problem.
Second, with my team, I try to spend some time giving them kind of like individual feedback.
Yeah.
I'll like watch them do a mediation opening statement, or I'll give them kind of like one, minor witness at trial just to kind of see how they do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of letting them dip their toe in the water. And then you're right, some of them you kind of have to just make the conclusion that they're going to be great at writing motions for summary judgment.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm not going to let them give the opening statement at trial because we obviously want to win. So sometimes it's some skills are teachable and some really aren't.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything wrong with these facts that we're bringing out. I mean, not everybody that works at a litigation law firm is going to be a true chair one trial attorney. It's just not it. You need second chairs. You need other people to do other things, and being able to utilize those people and their skill set. I don't think there's anything wrong. I think that's actually great. But the complaint that you just brought up, I've heard over and over and over again is, I've heard partners at law firms saying, I'm trying to get my folks involved and my clients won't let me. They want me to do everything. And I have the same problem. It's I get calls like, well, I need you to train this witness, or I need you to pick this jury. And I'm like, I'm booked for the next 3 months. You're going to have to trust my colleagues, right? And so it is a trust factor. I get that, but I think clients would be better off, talking to their outside counsel, and having a plan together for the long term to say, hey, this is what this is what we need from you. We need some understanding. We need the growth of our people because we want to be defending you for years to come. And I mean, if Holly or Bill gets hit by a bus tomorrow, now right. What are you gonna do, right? Let's not go get hit by any buses. Holly, how do you handle? That's a good segue too. How do you handle disagreements with clients? And here's the specific example. Client says, this is a bullshit case. This case is nothing. But you, Holly, are going, this actually could be something. And you don't see the liability or the damages the same way as your client. How do you handle those discussions? Because I see a lot of that too, where a client's saying, oh, come on, Holly, toughen up. This case is not so bad. Come on. And you're being like, well, no, I've seen this before. I see some red flags here. How do you handle those discussions with clients? Because I think those are really important. I think a lot of nuclear verdicts happen for this reason, is that somebody's off on their assessment of this case, and there's really not cohesion on how people see it.
Right. And a lot of defense attorneys, and even plaintiffs' attorneys, once their client gets like an expectation, because my husband's a plaintiff's attorney, so I've got a very fair and balanced household.
Oh
I
my.
hear it all.
Oh my. Or the comments I have, the questions and comments I have. Well, you're coming back on this podcast.
Yeah. Sometimes we've actually done like shows together. It's pretty funny. So
Does he reptile you during dinner?
no, but we do have a lot of evidence-based arguments regarding household chores, and who did what and what, at what time.
Oh
But
man.
going back to the question as to
Okay, sorry.
the client, I tend to have like a very clinical discussion with them. I'll say these are the red flags that I see, and then sometimes I'll try to show them old jury verdicts, or I collect transcripts from all kinds of cases, and I'll be able to tell them, well, in this case, this verdict happened and it had the exact same set of facts. So why is this one not dangerous when the other one had a $16 million verdict 2 months ago? So I think it's important to stay on top of what the verdicts have been and understand the facts in those cases. And that way, rather than just telling them your opinion, you're actually coming at them with some facts.
And you and I will be doing a focus group coming up here soon, and that's
Right.
an even better way to say, hey, clients show up, let's put on this case, let's run everything by a mock jury and see what they say, and you always learn something from those. Usually something you never anticipated, right?
Well, the jurors focus on things that it's
Yeah.
kind of scary. I mean, even to the
Yeah.
point where like I'll have to lay out my outfits like for the whole week of trial, and try to think if that's gonna, is this jacket going to offend somebody or something like that.
Well,
So it's amazing what they focus on. So it is good to get that data and use that to talk to the clients.
absolutely. Okay, last area. So of all the people I've seen on LinkedIn for as long as I've been on, I have seen you in exercise clothes more than any other person ever. I could rattle off your exercise wardrobe at this point. And you're very, very active. I am very activist too. I would argue we're probably the most fit people on LinkedIn. We could take that challenge, maybe have a battle of the network stars or something like that. How do you use because this is we both have stressful jobs. How do you use exercise and fitness to stay in shape, both physically, mentally, and how do you work? Because a lot of the attorneys I work with when I'm on the road and traveling, a lot of them tell me they want to exercise more, they want to be more healthy, but God, this job and all the how do you fit it in? What do you do? What's your strategy towards that? Because I find it to be very important. I'd be lost without it, and I know you're very active, but you have a very busy job too. How do you make it happen?
So I actually think being active helps me to be better at my job and to, not have as much fatigue from the job. Even I've noticed like I had an out of town trial in Gainesville last year, and the associate that was helping me was just, kind of wrecked at the end of the case, and I felt fine. So I just am pretty regimented with my schedule. So during a trial week, I wake up at 5 and I either like run on the treadmill or do the spin bike, kind of alternating. And I just make sure that I've made time for that. And it really doesn't take a ton of time to exercise. I mean, you can run like a lot of miles in less than an hour and you've had a pretty good workout. So it's really just a matter of budgeting the time, and then, understanding that if you are in good shape, you're probably going to feel better and your job's going to be less stressful because you feel better.
I have found that now I don't run because I have no ligaments in one of my ankles and a bum knee, and if I ran like you, I would be in I'd be in the ICU. So no running for me, but I'm very active in the gym. I lift heavy things until it hurts, and then I rest for a couple minutes and I do it again. I find that my creative thinking, my ability to think about things, think of whether it be an opening statement or voir dire questions as I'm working out, right? I'm not in front of this laptop. I'm not on the phone. I find that it's a really good time to think, creatively, and to come up with, strategic ideas, or even things like, with business development or something interesting, I want to talk about, on the podcast. I think it's also a good time to have a good mental impact on you, and to be thinking about things. But have you been like on that run and be like, you're in mile 3 and you're like, holy shit, I just thought of something brilliant, I have to write this down. Like, can you run back and write it down?
I don't run back and write it down, but I have thought of stuff like during,
Yeah.
during exercise. It's like, oh, because that, like, it's funny. The last trial I had, like, it was like I knew like what the theme was, and I was using like a classic literature reference, but I just like couldn't come up with it. And I was actually, well, my husband helped, so I have to credit him. But it's one of those, I'm like, it's this quote. Do you remember who did it? And he knew it. But so sometimes we're having like conversations in addition to my brain working while we're running. But definitely, I think there's actually some science to it. You're the neuroscientist, isn't it? Like the blood flow to the brain, and that makes our brain healthier, and prevents decline and all that stuff.
That's the hypothesis on that. I had to do a different podcast on that. Yeah, the blood for your brain is pretty constant regardless of what you're doing. However, it is showing that long term, in the long term, people that exercise, there is an association with less cognitive decline and things like Alzheimer's and stuff like that. So very protective, but yeah, I do find it helpful. So what I do, so when I'm in a gym, I do have my phone, but I'm on TikTok. What I do is I open up my notes app, and between sets, I'll think of something and I'll type it down on my notes app, and I could take it back to the office, when I'm done. If I think hey, this is a really good voir dire question, right? Boom, 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 boom. Now, if you're running, I got 5K, that's probably not going to happen. But I have to end with this. So I made this commitment, and because I do have some injuries, and I said I really want to build, my legs, but I can't run. I can't do things like deep squats like a big bodybuilder, so like that. So I looked it up, Bulgarian split squats. Have you done Bulgarian split squats?
So I actually tried them when you emailed me about it last week.
Oh, how did that work? I'm dying to hear this.
Yeah. So, well, I did not find them difficult. That's probably an
Oh,
unpopular
stop.
thing to say.
Stop.
But I run and I
Stop.
do Pilates. I didn't think they were that hard, but
Oh, now you're just destroying me on my own podcast. Okay, number one, they're very, very difficult. Number two, the amount of soreness and pain. Oh my gosh. But I've been doing it for several months now, so now I can do them. And again, I had some pre-existing injuries, so I had to be really careful. But any of our listeners, if you want to get your lower body in shape, and you just do them with body weight, you don't need to be using any weight. That can come later. But man, body weight Bulgarian split squats, wow, highly effective. I love them. Well, thank you for making fun of me. I appreciate that. But hey, listen, Holly, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to working with you soon. I am hoping that you live in Jacksonville. I'm hoping that the town is buzzing. Hopefully that the Jacksonville Jaguars can go on another run next year. You got Trevor Lawrence. He's got the best hair in the NFL. It looks like your hair, really. I mean,
I need to find out what conditioner he
yeah,
uses, because it doesn't even get tangled when he plays. That's what I'm like, how is that not a knotted mess at the end of the game?
it doesn't even get, and then when your quarterback, after the biggest win, roughly one of the biggest wins in Jacksonville Jaguar history, ends up at the local Waffle House to hang out with the regular people. The whole thing's on Twitter, right? I mean, and on TikTok. What a guy. So is Trevor just God in town? Does he just run the town?
He's really just kind of a class act. I mean, I don't know if you read the letter that he wrote. He wrote a thank you letter to
Yes,
Jacksonville
I did.
that was published everywhere. So he seems just like a legitimately nice guy.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have someone that's that good at something that's also humble and nice.
Yeah. Yeah. We see a lot of people out there, particularly athletes, getting in trouble or doing dumb things. That is not Trevor Lawrence. Okay, Holly, thank you so much for joining us. To our audience, thank you for joining us. What a great episode. Litigation Psychology Podcast, brought to you by Courtroom Sciences. I'm Dr. Bill Kanasky. We will see you next time.